حي على الفلاح.
Due to its strategic position between the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea, Malaysia, then Malaya, has long been the meeting place for traders and travelers from west and east. Back then, ancient Malay kingdoms within the northern region of the peninsula were still under Buddhist and Hindu influence. It is believed that Islam first arrived in Malaysia sometime between the 13th and the 14th century CE via Arab and Indian Muslim traders. At this time, the religion was embraced by only a selected few. Islam became widespread in the region with the arrival and conversion of the Parameswara, a Hindu prince and Singapore's last king, who had established the Sultanate of Melaka in the 15th century CE. Malacca became a renowned hub of Islamic studies. Islam continued to flourish in the peninsula during the 15th and 16th century CE, with greatly influenced the Malay lifestyle and culture, as can be seen until today. The earliest evidence of the arrival of Islam in Malaysia was discovered in Terengganu in the form of an ancient inscribed stone locally referred to as Batu Bersurat. Dated 1303 CE, the stone tablet with Jawi stands as proof that Islam had arrived in the east coast region of the peninsula long before Parameswara embraced Islam. The interior of the Malay Peninsula is endowed with bountiful resources, lush forests, coconut groves, a rich soil, an abundant supply of rain, and a population endowed with perseverance. Hard work and hospitality make this land an idyllic tropical resort. Through the ages, ships have used the coast of this peninsula to dock and transact business. If one were to visit this area around the year 1400, one would find Chinese, Indians, Omanis, Yemenis, Persians, and Africans intermingling with traders from Sumatra, Java, Bali, and Canton, exchanging goods and establishing trade relations. China exported silk, brocades, porcelain, and perfumes. India offered hardwoods, carvings, precious stones, cotton, sugar, livestock, and weapons. From the interior of Malaya came tin, camphor, ebony, and gold. Sumatra provided rice, gold, black pepper, and mace. Java was the source of dyes, spices, and perfumes. Cloves were exported from the Malaccas, and sandalwood came from Timor. Little is known about Malaysia's early history, but historians believe that as early as the first few centuries AD, trade on the Strait of Malacca helped to create economic and cultural links among China, India, and the Middle East. Among the most powerful and enduring early kingdoms was Srivijaya, which ruled much of peninsular Malaysia from the 7th to the 14th century with the support from China, and the Orang Laut, men of the sea, who originated from peninsular Malaysia and were perhaps the region's best sailors and fighters. By the 2nd century AD, Europeans were familiar with Malaya, and Indian traders had made regular visits in their search for gold, tin, and jungle woods. Within the next century, Malaya was ruled by the Funan Empire, centered in what's now Cambodia. The people of the Malay Peninsula adopted the Indian religions of Hinduism and Buddhism, religions which had a major effect on the language and culture of those living in Malaysia. There were numerous Malay kingdoms in the 2nd and 3rd century, as many as 30, mainly based on the eastern side of the Malay Peninsula. Among the earliest kingdoms known to have been based in what is now Malaysia is the ancient empire of Langkasuka, located in the northern Malay Peninsula and based somewhere in Kedah. In the 7th century, the powerful Srivijaya kingdom in Sumatra spread to Malay Peninsula and introduced a mixture of Hinduism and Mahayana Buddhism. Srivijaya was a maritime empire based in Sumatra that lasted for 500 years, from the 8th century to the 13th century. It ruled a string of principalities in what is today southern Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. When Srivijaya in China extended its sphere of influence, those cities became tributary states of Srivijaya. By the 14th century, Srivijaya's dominance had ended because it lost Chinese support and because it was continually in conflict with states seeking to dominate lucrative trade routes. As for other region of Malaysia, Borneo, evidence suggests that Borneo developed quite separately from the peninsula and was little affected by cultural and political developments there. The Kingdom of Brunei was Borneo's most prominent political force and remained so until 19th century British colonization. In the 13th century, the Malay Peninsula was under the control of the Java-based Hindu Majapahit Empire. The Majapahit Kingdom, 1293 to 1520, was perhaps the greatest of the early Indonesian kingdoms. It was founded in 1294 in East Java by Wijaya, who defeated the invading Mongols. Hinduism fused with Buddhism were the primary religions. Islam was tolerated, and there is evidence that Muslims worked within the court. Majapahit flourished at the end of what is known as Indonesia's classical age. This was a period in which the religions of Hinduism and Buddhism were predominant cultural influences. Beginning with the first appearance of the Indianized kingdoms in the Malay archipelago in the AD 5th century, this classical age was to last for more than a millennium until the final collapse of Majapahit in the late 15th century and the establishing of Java's first Islamic Sultanate at Demak. Islam made its initial presence in the Malay Peninsula as early as the 7th century. Individual Arab traders, including Sahabas, preached in the Malay archipelago, Indochina, and China in the early 7th century. According to local traditions, Islam was introduced to the Malay Peninsula coast by Arabs in 674 CE. In the next few centuries, the spread of Islam was greatly enhanced, partly by social contact as a consequence of trade, but more important still, by marriages. In a few decades, the Javanese, Sumatran, Malay, and other aristocracies of the coastal districts had gone over to the new faith. The common people followed the gradual stages down the social scale. Diplomatic marriages between aristocracies of different kingdoms spread the faith even further. A notable example was the marriage of the first Muslim Sultan of Pasai on the northwestern coast of Sumatra, who died in 1297 AD, to a daughter of the ruler of Berlak, also on the northern coast of Sumatra. The powerful Sultanate of Melaka too arranged many such diplomatic marriages with Borneo, Pahang, and Kedah, and with the Sumatran river ports of Siak, Kampar, Indragiri, and Jambi. In the Malay Peninsula, the first physical evidence of the arrival of Islam was found at a spot 20 miles up the Terengganu River. There, a stone inscribed with Arabic letters has been found, dating as far back as 1386 or probably 1326 AD. This evidence of the existence of Islam in Malaysia's east coast perhaps initiated the theory that Islam came to Malaysia through China. At the close of the 14th century, when Islam was spreading in conjunction with the prospering Indian trade, the nucleus of a new and powerful Malay kingdom and empire was taking shape. This was to replace the decaying might of the Hindu Javanese empire of Majapahit and become the first powerful Muslim empire in the region, Malacca. With its rapid rise as a commercial port of call during the first quarter of the 15th century, Malacca became the spearhead of the further advance of Islam, an advance achieved by growing commercial power and consolidated by judicious royal marriages. The most prominent were the Sultanate of Melaka and the Sultanate of Brunei. Professor Dr. Nazar Ahmad, PhD, wrote in the Encyclopedia of Islamic History, Muslim merchants dominated international trade in the Arabian Sea, the Bay of Bengal, and the East China Sea. A common religion, impeccable business integrity, and universal transaction laws based on the Sharia had enabled the Muslims to establish a trade network linking the coastlines of East Africa, southern Arabia, the Persian Gulf, and the Malabar coast with the islands of Indonesia and the southern coast of China. As early as the 8th century, there was a Muslim trading post in Canton. The coastline of Malaya was cosmopolitan, wherein merchants from Malabar, Arabia, and Africa lived and interacted with the indigenous Malay population and Chinese mandarins. It was into this universe that Providence injected a prince. Around year 1390, a prince from Java, Parameswara, was forced to flee his homeland, landing on the west coast of Malaya with a loyal following of about 1,000 young men. The prince lived off piracy for almost 10 years. At the time, Siam, modern Thailand, was the imperial power in the area. Parameswara drove out the Siamese and established the town of Malacca in 1403. The name Malacca derives from the Arabic word malakut, meaning marketplace. The Arabs had maintained a trading colony there since the 8th century. Once settled, the prince encouraged peaceful trade. The fame and fortune of the trading post grew until it attracted international attention. The Muslims dominated the trade in the Indian Ocean. Arabic had become the lingua franca of traders in this region. Islam was gaining a following in the islands of Indonesia. Across the straits from Malacca, the powerful Muslim kingdom of Aceh was emerging. Local folklore has it that around the year 1405, Prince Parameswara fell in love with a princess from the court of Pasai, accepted Islam, married her, and changed his name to Sultan Iskandar Shah. Thus it was love that brought Islam to Malaya. The bride brought with her good fortune for Malacca. The following year, the Emperor of China, Chu Tin, sent a delegation under Admiral Yin Qing, offering trade and friendship. The offer was gladly accepted, as the Sultan was under increasing military pressure from the Siamese to the north. More courtly transactions followed. In 1409, the great Chinese Admiral Zheng Yi visited Malacca at the head of a large flotilla of great ships. Admiral Zheng Yi was the greatest seaman of the 15th century. He was a Muslim. The Emperor of China, realizing the importance of Islam in the Indian Ocean region, had appointed him as Admiral of the Great Voyage. Zheng Yi continued with his flotilla to Aceh, Sri Lanka, Calicut, Bijapur, Ormuz, Aden, Jeddah, Zanj, East Africa, Zanzibar, Shafala, and then southwards, crossing what is today the Cape of Good Hope to the west coast of Africa. Admiral Zheng Yi brought an invitation for Sultan Iskandar Shah to visit Peking. In 1411, Sultan Iskandar Shah visited China, was warmly received, and was given presents of silk, gems, horses, gold, and silver. Malacca also received a most favored nation status from China and entered into mutual defense agreements to ward off further Thai encroachments into the Malay Peninsula. Upon his return, Sultan Iskandar Shah ruled as a benevolent monarch. He invited Muslim scholars from as far away as Mecca, honored them, and encouraged the spread of Islam. Malacca became not only the hub of international trade, but also a center for Islamic learning and a rich prize that was to be fought over the succeeding centuries by emerging European empires. Sultan Iskandar Shah died in 1424. His grave is not to be found because the Portuguese, when they captured Malacca in 1510, dug up the graves of all the sultans of Malaya and destroyed the tombstones. But the legacy of Sultan Iskandar Shah lives. He was a prince who brought Islam to Malaysia for the love of a beautiful princess. By the 15th and 16th centuries, Islam was the majority faith of the Malay people. In 1786, Great Britain bought Malaysia's Penang Island in an attempt to increase trade with China. Over the next century, British influence in Malaysia grew, and by 1915, Great Britain had acquired several additional Malaysian states. During World War II, Malaysia was occupied by the Japanese from 1941 to 1945. The end of the war brought a desire for independence throughout the country, with Malays wanting to create a Bangsa Melayu, or Malay nation. British officials promised independence to the nation and began working with Malay leaders to create an independent Malaysia. On August 31st, 1957, the Independent Federation of Malaysia was formed with Tunku Abdul Rahman as its first prime minister. Malaysia was recognized as a country in 1963. At the time, it included Singapore. Singapore separated from Malaysia in 1965.